and put them either in the chat box, or I'm sure Steve will welcome the microphones on later on. So again, though, you're welcome to turn your cameras on. It's always nice to see who's joining us, so feel free to do that. And at this time, I will turn it over to our Director of Government Affairs, Steve Furman, who will welcome our guest. Steve?
Thank you, Carrie, and welcome everybody. Thank you for being with us this morning. We're pleased to have with us this morning the Iowa Auditor of State, Rob Sand. And as you know from past experiences, we've talked with our state auditor on a regular occasion over the years, and we're finally able to bring Auditor Sand to our Friday forum get together. So he will be joining our conversation, and I think instead of trying to botch an introduction of the auditor, I'll just let him tell us about himself and tell us about the work of his office and whatever else he'd like to share with us, and then we'll take your questions. So, Auditor Sand, it's all you.
Sure. Thank you, Steve, and thanks, Carrie. Happy to be here. Hi, good morning, everybody. Hope you are all planning to stay indoors as much as you can today. That is my plan. Yeah, a little bit about myself. Grew up in Decorah, born and raised there. It's my dad's hometown. Mom was from Cedar Rapids, and went out east for college, saw what that was like, came back as soon as I could. It was interesting. Best thing about it to me, I mean, I had fun and I met some wonderful people, but really learned a lot about Iowa by leaving Iowa, and made me want to come home again. So went to law school at the University of Iowa, and then I spent the better part of a decade at the Attorney General's office, prosecuting most of Iowa's public corruption and major financial crime. So if you remember the Iowa Film Office tax credit scandal, most of those cases I prosecuted. The lottery rigging case was a case that I led the investigation and prosecution on. I'm trying to think if I had any specifically in Black Hawk County, and I can't think of any that I did that were financially based. I did some other prosecutions as well, but and I hit the point about maybe 6 years into the job where I was introducing myself to somebody, and I said what I always say. I'm not introducing, but describing. I said, I'm a happy, optimistic person, because I always have been. And for the first time, it was kind of like this: I'm a happy, optimistic person. And I realized it as I said it. The words literally kind of came out of my mouth and hit me. I was like, wow, that has never felt that way when I've said that before. And to be totally honest, I really think that the work that I had been doing was having an impact on me. Criminal prosecution is sin and darkness all day, every day. You don't get opportunities to do fun things. You don't get opportunities really to do good things. The best thing that you can do is make a terrible situation less bad, but you can't actually make it go away. Nobody's happy when it's done. And that's not great work for a happy, optimistic person. So I started thinking about what else might be out there that might be a better fit for me. And I had worked quite a bit with the auditor's office because they do most of Iowa's public corruption investigations. I knew Jim Cunningham over there, who you wouldn't know. I know Annette Campbell over there, who you wouldn't know. But folks that I had worked with, who I really respected, who I thought did good work, who I thought cared about being servants to the public. And so I started looking into the office and thinking about what it would be like to end up over there. I had seen things over the years that I would change, but it wasn't until I actually sat down and read Chapter 11 of the Iowa Code that I got really excited about the job. That's the piece that describes what the auditor's office does. And the biggest piece of it that was exciting to me, I won't bore you too much, I promise. This office has a really broad ability to make efficiency in government a huge piece of its mandate. It's already in the mandate. It's in Chapter 11, right? So the Iowa legislature, when they wrote that law, they wanted the auditor's office to be doing that kind of work. And just historically, they hadn't really been doing it. And that got me excited. Then all of a sudden I was thinking, hey, I can wake up every day and think about new ways to make government more efficient. And that's a good thing. That's having a positive impact, which is just a better fit for me. So I decided to run. I ran in 2018. I won. And, you know, we've been kind of going gangbusters since then. So it's really been a great time in the office. It's been a great time of great change. We've made a lot of adjustments. And I think that, you know, not everything is perfect. Not everything turns out the way you want it to be. But I think if you do know folks in the office, I think they'd say we're making a lot of changes and things are moving in the right direction. So I'm going to go through and describe some of those changes and some of the work we've been doing. And I want to have a lot of time for questions. I enjoy question and answer more than I enjoy talking to my phone here. So I'm looking forward to that. One of the things that I talked about doing when I was running was adding law enforcement officials to the office. There's a really clear reason for that. This office, when we conduct the auditor's office, when we conduct special investigations, we know a lot of them are going to end up in a court of law, that someone's going to get charged with theft or fraud or something related to that. And what I had seen over the years from the Attorney General's office is that on occasion, decisions would get made that had a massive impact on our ability to hold somebody accountable in a court of law. And the reason that it was happening was because the auditor's office was chock full of CPAs and accountants. When we want a lot of them, they're great people. We still have them there. But they didn't have anyone balancing it out with a law enforcement perspective. Nobody who, like myself, was a former prosecutor, nobody who was a former police officer, nothing like that. And what that meant was when we were conducting these investigations, we weren't necessarily thinking about how is this going to work in a court of law. What folks were thinking about was, you know, what's the truth and what do the numbers look like? And the truth is important and what the numbers look like are important, but there's rules in court that you've got to mind as well. And I won't, if you want, make a note, if you want me to go more in depth about the problems we had seen, I'm happy to, but rather than just babbling about it, you can make that be a question if you want to hear more. It suffices to say that we've added now 2 individuals with a great deal of law enforcement experience. A woman who had been with the Colorado State Patrol for 10 years and then moved to Iowa and had done 2 years of compliance work here is now in our office. And a gentleman who was a special agent with the Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General for about 25 years. Took early federal retirement and has now joined the auditor's office. And having them has been great. They are really able to make sure that when we are trying to do this work for Iowans, that we are looking at it from all angles so that we can make sure we're promoting and protecting accountability on the back end for folks, making sure that these cases are going to go into a court of law and be handled effectively. So that has been one thing that I talked a lot about doing during the campaign, and we have done. Another thing, to go back to the efficiency point, has been our new PI program. And I should say, I don't have the list in front of me, but kudos to Black Hawk County because we did get a response or 2 from Black Hawk County in our new program. PI. PI stands for Public Innovations and Efficiencies. That is the name of our program here that is focused on promoting efficiency. We named it Public Innovations, Efficiency, and Efficiencies because it spells pie, and because we think this program should be as popular as pie. Who does not want to save taxpayer money? If any of you know Drew Stensland, I know he's been kind of a man about town up there. And a recent UNI grad, he now works in the auditor's office. And this has been a real focus of his. He's done a great job with it. He's a big reason why we were able to get responses from all 99 counties in the first year of the program. I have 3 bad jokes that I will use to describe how the program works. Number 1, the heart of the program is the pie chart. So it's literally a checklist. You can find it on our website. In fact, if you want to go through this checklist in your own house, it'll help you save money. A lot of these steps are very basic energy efficiency steps, not all of them, but a lot of them you can use in your house. And so what we do is we ask government entities, cities, counties, school districts, to fill this out, fill out the pie chart, and then send it back to us so we can see how they're doing. Then what we do is we come back the next year and say, hey, time to check in, fill it out again. Are you doing better? Are you doing worse? That enables us to have a pie contest where we're actually going to be able to be traveling around the state when I'm doing my 99 county tour and delivering pie to some of our highest achieving governmental subdivisions around the state, which might sound really nerdy, but if the excuse that I have to eat pie is really nerdy, I will take it. So I'm very excited about that. I think it's going to be fun. But more importantly than that, I know we've got Senator Giddens and Representative Williams on here. We have a lot of people in this state who care about government doing a good job, who work in locally elected office like a school board or a county board of supervisors or a county auditor or a county treasurer, who want to serve their communities, and they don't often get lifted up enough. They don't often get enough recognition for doing a good job. And I think it's really important for us to do that. We live in a time where, I gotta be honest, I wake up a lot of mornings wondering why I'm in politics. I hate politics. I don't like partisanship. I registered as a registered independent when I first registered to vote, when I turned 18 in Decorah. And I did it because I'm a big believer in the idea that we ought to be trying to solve problems, not just trying to pick the red team or the blue team. There are a lot of people I know, unfortunately too few of them in politics, but a lot of people maybe in the local level in elected office who feel that way too. And I just think it's really important. And when we see so much denigration of the work that people in elected office do, and so much denigration of the work that public servants do, that we take an opportunity when people are doing a good job to lift them up. It's not that we shouldn't look at the bad. Trust me, our office leads the state in making sure that everyone is looking at the bad when it's done in the public sector with taxpayer dollars. But we can't just do that. We've got to point out the good and do that too. So I'm excited about the program. The third bad joke is that we are looking for pie recipes. So if anybody in your neck of the woods has devised a clever way to save some taxpayer money, whether it's a little or a lot, we want to hear about it. We will actually take that idea and add it to the pie chart so that we can spread that idea around the whole state of Iowa. Typically, the way we want to do that is by putting in the name and a phone number or email address for the person that started the idea, because number one, they deserve credit because it's their idea. And number two, we want other people to be able to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, we wanted to do this over here. We're running into this problem. How'd you get around that? So that's our pie program in a nutshell. I think it's a nice way to be doing something positive and optimistic, and just lifting people's spirits and lifting up good work when it's done in the government sector. We've also made a lot of strides on efficiencies in the office. Holy cow. I cannot tell you how stressful I don't think I got my email account opened and started on the first day when I got sworn in January 2019, but it was pretty soon after that. And it was the first day I had that email account, I had to do 3 clicks to send an email. I'm not even kidding you. 1 click, send, and then automatic spell check would pop up. Click 2, cancel. Are you sure? Pop up number 2. Yes, I'm sure. Cancel. Click 3. I didn't bother estimating how many hours over the course of a year with 100 employees we are saving by not making everybody click 3 buttons in order to send an email. But I know that we're saving money and saving time there. We also quit printing out and binding and mailing our finished reports to everyone. The office used to have people that would print and bind and then mail in snail mail a finished copy to everyone who's on a board. So if the city council's got 7 members, we would do that 7 times. Turns out we saved about $30,000 a year by not doing that anymore. And the wonderful thing is everybody's got a printer. So if they want to do it, if they prefer a printed copy, they can print it themselves. It works great. The people who don't want one, don't get one. We save a little bit of taxpayer money, and the people who want one can still print it out. We've rearranged the way the office works together. I don't know how much of a detail it's worth to getting into there, but just in terms of our 100 employees, we're improving accountability for our younger employees and helping them learn, helping people establish longer-term relationships with their coworkers, and making sure that people are assigned to specific tasks on audits long enough to see them through, so that they're actually held accountable for getting the entire task done as opposed to a piece of it. A lot of these ideas, a lot of the changes that we made in the office actually came from the office. I sat down with everybody that wanted to in the office, from Dana, our front desk staffer, to our deputies, and just sat with them for 20 minutes and made sure that a big piece of the conversation was, how can I make your life better? What can I do running the auditor's office here that's going to make you happier, make you like your job more? And so we've made a lot of those changes. I'll also touch briefly on pandemic related issues. It's been, a tough year in our office. It's been tough for everybody, obviously. Our office is no exception. In fact, I am at home right now. So if a 6-year-old comes in and tells me, as he often does, his computer's sound isn't working or is disconnected from his virtual school, I will have to excuse myself. But so far, we are doing great. But I've been working at home mostly. So is most of our staff. We went home back in March. And the reason we did that is typically we travel all around the state. And we didn't want to be a super spreader ourselves. Because if we had been continuing what we normally do, we'd be going from Des Moines to Black Hawk County to Cherokee and back again, and visiting with all kinds of clients and then being in the office with each other. We can do our work remotely. In fact, a lot of the changes that we made in 2019 were to facilitate remote work and facilitate work from home. So when the pandemic hit, we were actually in a really good position to say, hey, we're ready for this. Most of our employees actually enjoy working at home, the plurality, not a majority, but the plurality, when surveyed about it, have suggested that they would like to keep doing that forever. We did have a chunk of folks who wanted to get back into the office 3 months after that, back in June. But it was about 20% of the office, so we let them because that made sense. With just 20% capacity, people can stay distanced from each other and be just fine. So it has very much changed the way we work. It's also changed the work we do. We've been very active, making sure that the large amounts of money, taxpayer money that's getting spent in the state of Iowa, and the large amounts of government programs and government work that's being done that is out of the ordinary, has oversight. That's the heart of the job here. When I was running in 2018, I said I wanted to wake up the watchdog. This office is supposed to be a watchdog for Iowans and making sure that government is doing right. And I absolutely meant that when I said it. A lot of people say, I didn't know the auditor could do this. I didn't know the auditor could do that when they see us doing things. And I say, the auditor can. And it's good. Most of the people, again, who are outside of the political piece of things, when we're working with agency heads, when we're working with department directors, they welcome oversight. Think of all of you, sitting in your jobs there, the same way I sit in my job here. We are hammering what we are hammering on day in and day out, getting the work done. If someone can come in who has the time to take a step back and show us what might be a better way to do it, there's two mindsets we can take to that. One is, get out of my hair. But the other is, great. I want to get my work done as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I don't have time to do, to zoom out and oversee myself or ask those hard questions. So I'm really glad you're here to do that. And thankfully, in state government, a lot of the folks that we work with that are public employees take that approach. They say, thank you for coming in. Would you look at this, please? Can you look at that? And that's how the majority of our work pans out. So we've been very busy with a lot of different issues related to that. We did an audit of the reporting system for Test Iowa. We found that wasn't compliant with state law. Obviously, we've been looking at the deployment of about $1 billion in CARES Act money, finding that spending on Workday, $21 million getting deployed to Workday was not something that was allowable. And we're working with the feds and doing that because at the end of the day, it's their money. So we've been working in partnership with them, which has been good too. I also just, outside of sitting in the auditor's office, I had put something else together very early on that I just called Iowans Helping Iowans. And the idea behind it was, to kind of create a positive double whammy for folks. Anyone who sent in, we took donations, including donations from my wife and myself. But we took donations from the public, and then anyone who sent in a receipt from a local restaurant, as well as proof that they had had to apply for unemployment recently, we reimbursed them for their meal. And the great thing about that is people who had just lost their job because of the pandemic, they got a couple of things out of that. Number one, that person who lost their job, they got a meal paid for by someone else. Number two, that restaurant was able to make a sale, right? Because I know that a lot of our small business owners are struggling. And the number three, which I think is probably just as important or maybe more important, both the people involved in that got to get an understanding that people care. That someone out there set up a program, but someone out there donated money so that even though they're struggling, even though they've lost their job, somebody cares and somebody wants them to, even though they don't have the income for it, maybe have their favorite meal from a restaurant in town, even though it's a little bit of a luxury. We ran that program for a few months till there was a little bit more larger scale government relief in place. It ended up purchasing over 800 meals all around the state. We expanded it from a $20 reimbursement to a $40 reimbursement. We expanded qualifications from unemployed to then including first responders, medical professionals, and I think frontline workers. It's just I think a nice thing to do. I grew up in a family where not politics, but civics, public service is important. Both of my parents were independents when I was growing up, but my mom was a physical therapist for physically handicapped kids at the local AEA. My dad is a family practice doctor. She volunteered with Habitat for Humanity. He made house calls, volunteered at the free clinic. And it was a piece of my parents and a piece of it just being faith too, that's something that our faith, I think, calls us to do. And that was something that was important to me to do. I just was really at the beginning of the pandemic, like a lot of us, thinking, what can I be doing? And that was the best I could come up with. And it was better to do anything than nothing. So I'm hoping that we get through this. I know that I hope a lot of you, if you've been had an opportunity to, either you've gotten your vaccines or maybe your parents have. My wife has really devoted herself to figuring out the best way to get on a website and help and make sure that she's able to have the fastest browser and hit refresh at the right time. So our four, her parents and my parents have each been able to at least get one shot, not necessarily both of them yet, but I'm really excited to get through this. I can't wait to get back to normal, but to keep some of the things that we've learned, the silver linings through this pandemic, and bring them into the new normal with us so that we can live and learn and adapt to it. My biggest hope out of all of this, and I feel frustrated with where we are about it, is I wish that this had been an opportunity for us really to come together and work together. And I don't think, at least not at a national level, that has happened. But in my work, in the work we're doing in the office every day, that's the approach that we're trying to take. And whether or not that is swimming with the tide or swimming against it, that's what we're going to keep doing. I think that's, what was that, 25 minutes of rambling? So I should just take your questions.
Well, I enjoyed the ramble. I don't know about everybody else, but thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. We indeed will open it up for questions. If anybody has a particular question they'd like to ask Rob, that would be in order right now. And while we're waiting for people to think up their questions, I'll ask you one. What's been probably the most eye-opening, startling, attention-getting, whatever, thing that you've run into in your work in this office versus what you were doing in the Attorney General's office?
So the management piece is relatively new. At the Attorney General's office, I did not have staff working under me. I'm now running an office with 100 people in it. Now, I had been editor-in-chief of one of the law journals at the University of Iowa, and that is it's not a full-time job, but we had about 50 people on staff for a year. And so I've run an organization for an amount of time before, and that's a serious organization. You're publishing work from law professors and scholars all around the country, and you've got to get it published on time and get it edited correctly. The fun thing about that is I enjoy it, and I think I think that it shows for most of the people in our office. Like I said, when I started, I sat down with everybody, including folks who don't work on the audits, but Dana, who answers the phones at the front desk. I want Dana to be happy. And I really am so thankful that I get to work in a job where I have the opportunity to make people's jobs better. Because we get up and we go to work for a lot of our waking hours. And if our job sucks, it's really hard for the rest of our life to be fun. And so the question that I ask people all the time is, what can I be doing to make your job better? How can I make your life better? And we got a lot of answers, and we've put a lot of them in place. But I'll pick up the phone and call people who are, 3 layers down in our hierarchy, because I think that their perspectives are important, that the people who are the closest to the problem oftentimes have the best ability to solve it, but also because I want them to know that they should feel encouraged to contact me and contact managers when they have problems, not discouraged, because we care about the culture of the office. We care about whether or not they feel valued. We care about whether or not they're believers in their work and called to their work. So that piece of it has been, I guess the biggest surprise of there was that, and I do not put this upon my predecessors. My immediate predecessor, Mary Mosman, had pegged 2 individuals for promotion to the 2 highest seats in the office, the deputy for each of the major divisions. And I actually went ahead after I won and promoted those same people, because they were the most qualified, and I don't care. One was an independent, one was a Republican. I don't care. We have a tripartisan senior leadership team in our office. Good. Why shouldn't we? I mean, don't you, when you can find people that you think differently from, but who are still reasonable, don't you find that your conversations with them oftentimes leave you thinking more serious thoughts about your own assumptions about the world, about your own preconceived notions about the world? I'm glad that we run this office in that way. I'm sure some people wouldn't believe it, but there have been times where other people are ready to jump in on something who might be more aligned with the politics of the person we might be jumping on, where I'm the one saying, hey, I don't think that that's the right way to go. And it's because we have people thinking differently from each other, making decisions together, that I think we've been able to make a lot of good decisions in the office.
I'm getting some questions in the chat box here. First one that we'll ask is, over the years, there have been millions of dollars from lawsuits like the tobacco lawsuits and so on and so forth that have come into the state. Where does that money go?
Good question. So tobacco, for example, is specifically goes out according to the terms of the settlement. That settlement is really old by now. I did not work on tobacco-related litigation when I was in the AG's office, but I can say with certainty, for example, that a piece of it goes towards anti-smoking initiatives, anti-smoking advertisements, things of that sort. Another piece of it goes towards paying for the legal work related to the tobacco settlements, because it still is going on in terms of compliance, day in, day out. Most of that stuff is consumer protection. So for example, I think there was a settlement with the The one I'm thinking of is the car company that was telling everybody they had clean diesel, and the name is escaping me right now. But I don't know if it was Volvo, but they said our diesels are really clean, and it turned out to be a load of hog manure, and they had to pay up. And a piece of that goes towards defraying the costs of the legal representation in the Consumer Protection Division in the Attorney General's office. Volkswagen, yes, there you go. Thank you. But yeah, it typically depends on the terms of the settlement. So if there are victims, if there are people who have actually lost money, that they can prove that they have lost money, usually a piece will go back to them, but it varies just settlement to settlement.
Okay.
I want to say another thing about something else too. Typically those settlements are with private companies, and it's done through the Consumer Protection Division in Attorney General's office. We also have to pay settlements when state employees screw things up. And I am really sick and tired of taxpayers being, in every example, left on the hook for the wrongdoing of public employees. It's one thing if it's a snowplow driver who gets in an accident. We're not going to find snowplow drivers to plow the roads if we say you get in an accident, you're on your own, right? Any employer, whether public or private, would cover that. But we had a case that settled back in 2019 of really horrific sexual harassment. And Dave Jameson was the guy who committed the acts. He was a manager. People would see him harassing employees and he would intimidate them into not saying anything. And his harassment was repeated. It was over people he was in a supervisory capacity for. And why on earth are we as taxpayers, why are we the ones paying $4 million? The victims of his harassment should be compensated, but then we should be going after him as a state of Iowa. That guy has an IPERS account with an expected payout of like $1.5 to $1.9 million over the rest of his life. Why is he going to get a penny of that? It makes me angry. If we want to have accountability, we need to have people know that if you do things like that, where your bad acts are intentional and they are repeated, that you're going to be the one paying for it, not taxpayers. We also, a lot of I was talking about this right at the very beginning. I've been in the Black Hawk County Courthouse. The times I was there were for sexually violent predator civil commitment cases, not for financial cases. I did a lot of those, and they were the worst of the worst that we were trying to get committed to a treatment facility. And in every one of those cases, we'd go through the jury selection process, and we would try to weed out people who maybe had some tie, whether it was through their own life experience or a loved one, to someone being sexually assaulted. And I can't tell you how many times I had to sit in judges' chambers quietly with just the judge and the other attorney and listen to Iowans come back one by one and share their story or the story of their son or daughter about how they were harassed or they were assaulted and why they didn't think they could sit on this jury because they wouldn't be listening to the evidence. They'd just be thinking about what happened to their loved one. We don't talk about this problem enough. I know that we don't like to hear about it because it's uncomfortable and it's negative, but we also don't talk about it enough because it affects a lot of people in this state. And when that settlement came before me sitting on the Attorney General's office, I thought of so many of the people who came in and sat and shared something that they had maybe never even shared with their husband of 35 years. And there's no way I was going to vote for a settlement that didn't try to hold him accountable for doing it. Because we're not going to change anything unless we change something. So I can't. Money. So sometimes the question is, to go back to the question, where the money's going to. Sometimes the question that we got to think hard about is, where's that money coming from? And I think it ought to be coming from the people who are truly need to be held accountable, not because of an accident, but because of intentional actions that they committed.
Good thoughts. Another question here. What methods do you use to communicate out the good things that you're doing This person said that they hadn't previously heard about the meal reimbursement program or the PI program. What sorts of methods do you use to communicate?
I'm active on Twitter. I try to make Twitter be a fun place. I'm on there at RobSandIA. That's the same place I am on Facebook, and the same place I am on Instagram. When I post, when you see posts from me on Facebook and Twitter, that is actually me. You can actually reply to me on Twitter. I am the person replying to you. It is not, 8 consultants crafting every word, which also means you're going to see things occasionally that you think I should have worded better. Sorry, I'm a human being. But we have a PIO in the office. I try to be active on social media to communicate about the things that we're doing in the office and what I'm up to, as well as, just my life. And we try to get out there and talk to folks about it as well. I'm the first person in the office that has done the 99 county tour. I think it actually makes more sense for a state auditor to do it than any other statewide elected official. That's because the state auditor's office literally has clients in all 99 counties. So if my employees are going there, why would I not go there? And so we do that to communicate with folks. And I think we'll probably get a little bit more coverage. The PI program is new. We haven't yet done our first round of our PI contest. But I think when we are looking back at this year's entries and recognizing those that have done the best job, I think we'll see a good round of coverage for the PI program.
Okay. As the auditor, this questioner says, you serve on several boards. Tell us what you see on those boards and also comment on the future of Honey Creek Resorts.
Oh, that is a very good question. So I serve on the State Appeal Board. That's the board that pays those settlements. So when I was talking about the Dave Jamison sexual harassment settlement, that's one of the boards. Your state auditor sits on that along with your state treasurer and the governor's director of the Department of Management. And the Attorney General's office negotiates those, but then they need our approval to actually get them finished. We see a lot of accidents, snowplow drivers, pretty much any state employee that you can imagine is in a car a lot. We see a lot of those. So state patrol, might get in an accident, stuff like that. Inmates who think that they've been mistreated, medical. There's a lot of medical malpractice cases from the University of Iowa that come through there. Not because the University of Iowa is a bad hospital, but because there's just a lot of medical practices happening there, right? It's one of the biggest offices in the state. Bigger office means more cases. And it's one of the only state-run medical facilities. If something goes wrong in a county hospital, that's not going to come to the state appeal board. It's going to be handled at the county level. I also sit on the executive council. The executive council is all statewide elected officials who sit on that and have a vote. And then in addition to that, there is the Attorney General's office that doesn't have a vote, but provides legal counsel to this executive council. That's typically emergency allocations of money. So we can sort of access the general fund in the same way the legislature can. So if somebody needs money in a hurry, if there's an emergency, if there's been a tornado, that sort of thing, if something needs to get repaired after a storm that's state property, that stuff comes through the executive council. Honey Creek Resort is a very good question. So Honey Creek is owned by you and I. We're the people of Iowa. And it is run by a hospitality company named Delaware North. Delaware North is a big hospitality company. They're pros. They're in this business. Doesn't mean that they're good or bad, but it means that they, typically speaking, this isn't their only thing that they're doing. I guess the easiest way, honestly, and the most appropriate way for me to answer that question at this point is to say, I think that's right now all I can say. We have a legal restriction in the auditor's office. I can't discuss, no one in my office can discuss information that we've learned in the course of an audit until we put it in a report and publish that report. And then whatever's in that report, we can discuss. But we're not allowed to discuss it prior to that under Iowa Code 11.43. And that's my legal obligation. So,
but from that, I take that there is I take that there is an audit underway,
Uh,
or can you not even confirm or deny that?
no, we can confirm when an audit is underway. We can say, hey, we're looking at this. We just can't say, how exactly we're looking at it. The situation there is fairly unique. And so I think I'm probably better off just stopping. And I also don't mean to suggest that there's necessarily anything terrible happening there. Let me put it this way. I think it's publicly documented. I've read a newspaper article about this, that there are some issues with transparency about Honey Creek and what information is available to taxpayers. So I can say that because I read that in a newspaper. And I can tell you that we are big advocates for increasing transparency related to taxpayer assets and taxpayer property.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Another questioner asked, do you receive many whistleblower cases? If so, how do you respond to those?
We do. Most of our special investigations come from someone saying, hey, you need to look over here, which is great because, anyone who's worked in law enforcement will tell you, we want to catch the bad guys. It's a factor of looking in the right place and being in the right place at the right time. Everything that comes into our office is confidential. The same reason that whistleblowers can feel comfortable, picking up the phone and calling or sending an email is the same reason that I couldn't just get really specific about Honey Creek or anything else for that matter. We have to maintain confidentiality. So we have people bringing information in all the time. We then have to sort of try to sort out what's true fact from fiction, and try to figure out what our priorities are too. Typically speaking, the larger amounts of money or the question of risk to larger amounts of money is always going to be a bigger priority. And then there's always a little bit of a question of, okay, how are we going to get paid for doing that work? Like everything else in the world, our employees are getting paychecks, and we got to make sure that we can keep their paychecks coming for the work they do. Our budget is only about 10% an appropriation from the state. 90% of what we do is actually billing. So we are not a small business, but our operations are much more similar to one than that of most government entities. And so we've typically got to have a billing arrangement and an ability to say, okay, this is important, and also it's something that we are going to be able to do, just in terms of making the income meet the expenses, which usually isn't a problem, but it's just a consideration.
Right. Sort of almost a follow-along question is here: are most of your investigations a response to a complaint? Are there investigations that are routine year to year?
So most of our investigations are routine year to year. We audit every state agency at least once a year. And we also do lots of audits of counties, cities, school districts. An audit, every state agency gets an audit every year. Every county gets an audit every year. Every city with a population of, I think, 2,000 or more gets an audit every year. Most of them are routine. And the way an audit works typically is if you've got 30 different places you might look, you're going to pick 6 of them or 8 of them in any particular year to dig into. And you're not going to tell your client where you're looking. So it kind of keeps them guessing. They'll never know where you're going to look. So most of the work that we do is routine. The rest of it is either coming in from complaints, or if we see something in the newspaper that we think deserves more clarity, where taxpayers need more answers, we'll dig in on that. And I want to point out something too. I was talking earlier about how I really detest partisanship. I'm in a reality where I am registered as a Democrat. Our governor is a Republican. I can't do anything to help anyone understand that if we had had a Democratic governor, I would be doing exactly the same, other than to point out, when I was at the Attorney General's office, I prosecuted Democrats just the same way as I prosecuted Republicans. And we have actually been willing, and this is a new thing in the auditor's office, we have been willing to dig in and sound the all clear. So if something is in a newspaper that we read about and we think that's troubling, and we decide to dig in on it, I will dig in on something, even if I think it's probably legitimate, because maybe aspersions have been cast that look like they might be unfair. So if you remember, the University of Iowa sold a large piece of real estate in Des Moines, the AIB campus. Lots of people were saying, hey, that's assessed at $7 million. Why did it sell for 1.7? Who got the sweetheart deal? What's going on here? And honestly, I've worked in, I just thought, you know what? Those are good questions. We should answer them. And so we dug in and we found that, in fact, the people who bid 1.7 was the highest bid. And we talked to the assessor's office and they said, well, because that property was owned by a nonprofit, no one's been paying taxes on it. And so nobody had any reason to challenge the assessed value. And it was a very large and very weird property. Large properties and unusual properties are both difficult to assess accurately. And so when you have a large, weird property, then it's even that much harder. So the assessor said, no, we think that we would absolutely defer to, whatever people want to bid on it as what the value is. And so we dug in, and instead of, there have been situations in the past where the office has said, well, we got to find something wrong. We dug in and we said, no, this is fine. And, that's a situation where at the end of the day, I want to be focused on truth, and I want to be focused on integrity, and I want to be focused on accountability. We also dug in on allegations that a donor that runs a large business may have gotten favorable treatment in getting a contract with the alcoholic beverages division. And we dug in on that and said, no, actually that looked fine. We don't think that that was done wrongly. So sometimes it's in newspapers, sometimes it's whistleblowers, but at the end of the day, it's kind of a question of what do we think looks substantial and important, and something where we're going to be able to keep the lights on too.
As you're looking to the future, do you see your office continuing to look the way it does, or do you have some ideas for further change that you'd really like to implement to maybe, create a new vision for the auditor's office? We have done that. We are in a point where now we are trying to pull back on the reins a little bit in terms of the volume of change in the office. And the reason is change is hard. Even when you're a believer in the idea, if as we're sitting here in our job, somebody says, hey, this is going to completely change over the next year and a half, that is uncomfortable and it's difficult. We have gone from a culture that is very top down, do what you're told, taskmaster, rap on the wrist, to a culture that is very much focused on treating every employee as an adult, as opposed to someone that needs constant supervision. We trust our employees to get their job done. We trust our employees to come forward and talk to us when there's something that's stopping them from getting their job done, because we want to address it to make their job better. And when people don't get their job done, they get fired. So there's always that too. I know that's one of the jokes that a lot of people have about the public sector, is it's a great place to go if you don't ever want to worry about getting fired. One of the first questions that I asked Marlis and Annette, our two deputies, when I met with them after winning and before I started the job, was, who needs to get fired? Because if you're in a place where you've got people who are dead weight, it's frustrating, because you're in there pulling your weight, you're in there working hard, and you see them not doing anything, and you're like, well, why am I working so hard? When people don't get their work done, it doesn't help them, and it doesn't help anyone else in the office for them to continue to pull a paycheck. The good news is that the answer I got was, actually, we already have a pretty consistent review system in place. In the auditor's office, if you're not getting your work done, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you get put on probation, and if it doesn't get better, you get let go. So there's always that in the background for folks, which I think is what it should be like in any working environment. But at the end of the day, we have really
change the office to a place that focuses on building people's skills and also respecting their input and their perspectives on their own work, to try to make that work easier for them and easier for everyone else.
Good. That's what I've got out of the chat. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask a question of the auditor? See nobody.
Oh, hey, Jim Denholm, I see your name on here. I got to say hi.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah. So Rob and I had the fortune to go through Leadership Iowa together. So I know many of you on this call have been through that. So that's how I first got to hang out with Rob.
Good experience. How are your boys doing?
They're good. I'm glad Iowa has their kids back in school. I'll just say that.
I agree. I mean, imagine if you are someone who is well, look, I can work at home, right? If you can't work at home, if you can't bring your kids to the office, what are you going to do? I mean, there has to be some ability to send your kids to school. And if school is closed, then all those people, they're just going to be sending their kids to a daycare instead, which is going to have the same result in terms of transmission of the virus. I mean, folks who have no options have to be able to send them somewhere, and it makes more sense to send them to school than try to set up some alternative childcare system where they're not going to be as educated out of it, and they're still going to be having whatever level of transmission that it is, it's still going to be the same. One other thing I'll note, I guess we're close to out of time, but I'll do this in just 1 minute. I forgot to mention our statewide work, statewide jobs program, which is another change that we've made in the office. And this is one that I guess is part of an answer to that last question. I would like us to get to the point where a lot more of our employees don't live in Des Moines. Like I said before, we travel to all 99 counties. We have clients in all 99 counties. Why don't we let people live in all 99 counties? Now we do. This is a change that we made about a year ago. Once you've been in the office for a year, and we know that you know what you're doing, and we know that we know you and you know us. If you tell us, hey, I want to move to Benton County, if you tell us, hey, I want to move to Clayton County, we'll say, okay, cool. And we will assign you to work that is as close as possible to your home. It makes you happier. It makes our clients happier because it reduces hotel costs for travel for our clients, because mileage is always going to be cheaper than hotels. So even if you're driving an hour every day, that's going to be a lot cheaper than a hotel room. And more importantly to me, someone who grew up in Decorah, I mean, I remember the feeling in town when a business shut down or when a family moved away. In small towns in Iowa, we live and die by the family, by the person. And whether you feel like your town is moving in the right direction or holding on strong or slipping away, every single person counts. And here in Des Moines, that's not true. If a restaurant closes in Des Moines, people say, oh, well, I wonder what will go into that space next, because it's assumed that something else will go in there. I'm really happy to see our employees leave to go to Clayton. We have one in Clayton County, one that went to Mount Pleasant. And it's been a pandemic, so people have kind of put a pause on major life changes, but it's a good program, and I'm glad we're doing it. I'd like to see more of it in state government. There's no reason that the most prosperous part of the state of Iowa should have a monopoly on the economic benefits of state employment. We should be spreading state jobs out all over the state.
Well said. Well said. Well, if there's nobody that wants to ask a question at this point, I think I'm going to just say thank you very much, Rob. We really appreciate the time that you spent with us this morning. It's been really enlightening, kind of feel like we've gotten to know you a little bit. So that's a good thing for all of us. Please accept our thanks and our applause and everything else. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. It was fun to be here. Yeah, and thank you to the folks for having their cameras on so I can see some faces there. It makes it a little bit easier than just talking to an empty screen.
Yep, I believe it. I believe
it.
So that's it for this morning. We'll be back together again on March 12th. for our next Friday forum. Speaker TBD. So we'll figure that out and get that information to you all, but please try to be with us again on March 12th. And
Thanks for
one
joining
last
us.
time, Rob, thank you. Carrie,
Bye.
back to you.
Yep. Stay safe and warm, folks.